My name is Brett Ellis. I'm the current chair of the Lake County Democrats. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for showing up here this morning to hear Mr. Andrew Yang. And also to thank the people at Groundswell Cafe for fine food. Everybody on the team. So one of the nice things that I realized that when I walked in, the candidate was actually here. You know, I think that's
not always the case.
But with that, I don't want to take up any more of your time because I know you want to hear Mr. Yang. But with that, please welcome Mr. Andrew Yang.
Hello. If you're in the back, can you join us a little bit in the front? I know the acoustics are not that great, so if you're in the back, I have a feeling this is going to make you better. Thank you. Oh, look at that. They're moving furniture on our behalf.
Do you want a microphone?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Oh, my gosh, and now I'm getting a mic. So now the record movement.
They're set up into new space. It's really nice.
This is so nice. Look at this. It's so fun. They're going to get a mic, too. So it's all like...
Yeah, tell them they can move the furniture back.
You know, I'm going to start talking without the mic here and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Yang. I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020. And I certainly never thought I'd run for president. I'm not a career politician. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm someone who likes trying to solve problems, really. So my parents met as immigrant graduate students at UC Berkeley. My father's a physicist who generated 69 U.S. patents for GE and IBM. My mom's an artist. Nice. Look at this. I went to college, studied economics. Anyone here studied economics? I knew there was always someone. Didn't know what to do, so I went to law school. Practiced law for 5 unhappy months. Said this is not the job I need. And so I left to start a business. How many of you all are entrepreneurs who have started a business? So if you have your hand up, you know that's really, really excruciatingly difficult. It was so difficult that my little company crashed and burned. I call it like a mini rise and maximum fall in my 20s. So I owed $100,000 plus in law school loans because law school was very expensive. I lost investors a couple $100,000. And my parents were still telling people I was a lawyer. Like, that was pretty great. So the way I got better was I worked for a startup in the technology space for a number of years, and then I became the head of an education company that grew to become #1 in the United States and was acquired in 2009 by a public company. So 2009 was a rough time in much of the country. It was during the financial crisis. How was it here in Cedar Rapids?
We had a flood.
Oh my
Still
God.
trying to recover.
Yeah, that's terrible. So it was like natural disaster, economic disaster, the rest of the country.
Right down in here. Yeah.
Wow, well, this place is great now.
Yeah.
So in 2009, I was looking around and thought, wow, the country is going in the wrong direction. Like the wannabe whiz kids crashed Wall Street, like took all of us down with them. And so I personally taught the analyst classes at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and JP Morgan. And I saw all of these directionless wannabe whiz kids going to the same industry over and over again. And I thought, well, this is a disaster. And then I thought, well, what do I want these young people to do instead of all trying to become like the next Gordon Gekko or whatever? And I thought, well, what I want them to do is I want them to become entrepreneurs and start businesses in Detroit, New Orleans, Cleveland, St. Louis, Birmingham, cities like that. So I quit my job, I donated $120,000 to start a new organization called Venture for America, and then I started calling rich friends and asked them, do you love America? And then the spark moment said, what does it mean if I say yes? And then I said, at least $10,000. And then 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000. I said, well, I thought you did. And then, so we have $250,000. Fast forward to today, budget's around $6 million, helped create several thousand jobs around the country. I was given an honorary ambassadorship of entrepreneurship by the Obama White House, also known as the Good White House. Got to bring my wife to meet the president, so my in-laws liked me for a little while. And so, how many of you all like documentaries? A lot of Democrats like documentaries. How many of you have access to a Netflix password? So there's a documentary on Netflix right now about my work with Venture for America that's directed by an Oscar-winning director. It's called Generation Startup. It's on Netflix right now. You can throw it in the queue. It's family friendly, so if you have teenage kids or interested in entrepreneurship. It follows 6 young people as they try to create businesses in Detroit over a couple of years. And so that's what I spent 6.5 years doing, is helping young people start businesses around the country. Now, it was incredible work. But then Donald Trump became our president in 2016. Some of you might have seen that coming because maybe your friends and neighbors were like really pro-Trump. Maybe not, because this is probably a fairly liberal area. But when Donald Trump became our president, it was like, to me, a shell shock. It's like, okay, we have to stop everything, re-examine what's happening. Now, what are the mainstream press explanations for why Donald Trump's our president today?
Because of people like us.
Because of people like you. What do you mean by that?
The Midwest.
Right? So, I mean, that's true. It's like, well, what's going on in the Midwest? And what is going on in the Midwest? So, the big explanations that you see out in the press go something like this, in my opinion. Russia, Facebook, the FBI, racism. It's some combination of those things. But I looked at the numbers and I said, there's one central driving explanation, which is related to the Midwest, which is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. And then if you look at the voting district data, there's actually a straight line up between the adoption of industrial robots in a voting district and the movement towards Donald Trump. It's the strongest correlation you can find. So why is the country not discussing that? We're in the 3rd inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of the country. It's called the 4th Industrial Revolution. The first inning was the deregulation of financial services. The second inning was the decimation of manufacturing employment. Went from 17 million to 12 million over an 18-year period. The third inning, which we're in the midst of right now, is the phasing out of brick and mortar retail. How many of you noticed stores closing where you live? Why are stores closing? Amazon, right? Amazon's like a giant black hole or vacuum sucking up $20 billion in business every year. Stores could survive for a while, but now 30% of American malls and stores are closing. What is the most common job in the U.S.? Working in retail. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman making between $10 and $12 an hour. And we know that there's not a lot of savings in many of those households. So if 30% of the malls and stores close, what happens to those workers? Now, the retail, so that's the 3rd inning. The 4th inning is going to be self-driving cars and trucks. Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states, including Iowa. 3.5 million Americans drive a truck for a living. Now, my friends in Silicon Valley are working on trucks that can drive themselves. And why are they working so hard on that? With the money, $168 billion a year in financial incentives that you can automate truck driving. And that's not just pay or compensation for the drivers. It's also equipment utilization because the trucks never need to stop. Human-driven trucks have to stop after 14 hours so the driver can get out and sleep. Robot truck, 24/7. Robot trucks can daisy chain together, one after the other, so the wind resistance goes down and the fuel efficiency goes up. And the theory is that right now, 4,000 Americans die in accidents with trucks every year, so you can even save lives. So that's where all the money's going. Do you think there's $168 billion in financial incentives to improve the truck drivers' lives? No. But there's $168 billion to try and make their job go away. So then you have 3.5 million truckers, and over 5 million Americans who work in truck stops, hotels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out every day. That's going to be the 4th inning. The 5th inning is going to be artificial intelligence displacing call center workers, bookkeepers, accountants, lawyers. My friend, so AI, the way it's been going, AI's been hyped for years, but it hasn't been able to do much of anything. And if you call a customer service center right now and you get an automated voice, what do? You pound the keyboard until you get a human. You're like, human. And then eventually it gets you to a human and you're like, all right, we have a conversation. In about 2 or 3 years, they will be indistinguishable. You will call, and then the AI will pick up and be like, hey, how's it going? What can I do for you? They'll be like, hey, can you do this? And be like, sure. human voice that they just mapped into thousands of mini prompts. There are 2.5 million call center workers still in the United States making $14 an hour. So the fifth inning is going to be AI taking out the call centers, it's already happening. In financial services in particular, they're like getting rid of people, insurance, they're getting rid of people. So this is the true nature of the problem. It is not immigrants that are causing these economic concerns. It is technology, the nature of our economy, that's pushing human labor further to the side. So this is the mega trend, the fourth industrial revolution we're in the midst of. And so I had a freak out. Imagine being the guy who's getting medals and accolades and awards for creating thousands of jobs around the country, and then realizing that your work is like pouring water into a bathtub that's a giant hole ripped in the bottom. Yeah. And the hole in the bathtub threatens to destroy us. So then I took my findings, I wrote a book about this stuff, I took my findings to Washington, D.C., met with Democrats because I'm a Democrat and I work in the Obama administration. And I said, guys, this is what got Donald Trump elected. This is the real set of problems. What are we going to do about it? And what do you think people in Washington said to me when I asked them that question? Crickets. The answers I got were literally, we cannot talk about that. We should study that. And the third one, the most common, was we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Sounds very reasonable, very professional. And then I said, hey guys, I looked at the numbers. Do you want to know how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers that lost their jobs? You all want to guess on a percentage basis?
5%, 0 to 15.
0 to 15%, that's right. No one ever gets to 80, of course I actually low, but everyone knows that those programs wouldn't work. And the brutal truth of it is the average truck driver is a 49-year-old man, and if you were in a foyer, and you had a choice between a 50-year-old former truck driver with health problems that had some government certificate that you just made up, and a 25-year-old recent community college graduate with more current skills, who's younger, cheaper, and wants less from you, you're going to take the second person. It's not like there's some certificate that's somehow magically going to make the truck driver like, and that's the kind of fantasy that our politicians are actually passing off as policy. And so when I said to them, look, we're terrible at retraining, by the numbers, then the response I got to that was, well, I guess we'll get better. And then they just went back to their salad. So I came back from this set of meetings and was like, oh my gosh, are we this far gone as a country? And there was someone in Washington, D.C., and I thank God that I had a staff member with me, because you would think I was just making this up. But someone said to me in Washington, D.C., he actually said, Andrew, you're in the wrong place. No one here is going to do anything about what you're talking about. Because this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. You're going to have to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring it crashing down on our heads, and only then will we wake up. And I heard that and I said, challenge accepted. So then I started drawing up plans saying, okay, if you had to try and usher America through the greatest technological and economic transformation in our history, and I could do anything I wanted, what would you do? So if you were here today, you probably heard this about me. There's an Asian guy running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month.
That's a good thing that we heard, though.
No. And then you were like, wow, that's awfully interesting. Like, let me hear that. So, if you're in the midst of this wave, and you look at our history, it turns out this is a deeply American idea. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. He called it the citizen's dividend. Martin Luther King fought for it the year before he was killed. It was called the guaranteed minimum income. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists signed a study saying this would be great for America. And it was so mainstream that it passed the House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon as the Family Assistance Plan, and came this close to being law. It would have guaranteed a family of 4 an income of about $30,000 in today's dollars. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how does Alaska pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Technology.
Marijuana, that's right. It's technology. It's AI, it's big data, it's self-driving trucks. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year?
Zero.
Zero. How is that possible? $1 trillion company, and I'm not Amazon's fault. It's our fault. Like, Amazon's job is to hire the best accountants and lawyers it can to try and get zero taxes. It's our job to make sure that never happens. And so then you look at it and say, okay, Amazon's sucking up $20 billion in business, and how much are you getting back from people who buy with grow? And that's just going to accelerate. Amazon's going to buy the AI, Amazon's going to start having drone fleets, Amazon's going to do it all, and then your communities are just going to get progressively depleted. And everyone's going to look around saying, where did the money go? And so I'm here to tell you, I'm going to go get that money back from Jeff Bezos and the gang and give it to you all in the form of a dividend. Then if you are all getting $1,000 a month, what are you going to spend it on? Where does that money go?
Grocery store.
A little bit of it goes back to Jeff and the gang. You're going to buy an extra thing on Amazon, it's cool. But most of it's going to stay right here. It's going to go to groceries, to rent, to car repairs, to tutoring for your kids, to volunteer organizations, to religious organizations. It's going to supercharge many of the things that we like. Because you're going to see more art, you're going to see more creativity, you're going to see more volunteering if people have an extra $1,000 a month. But most of it's going to stay right here. It's going to grow the Iowa economy by $15 billion, or approximately 14%. And if you think that can't be done, there's nothing stopping the majority of citizens from declaring ourselves a dividend, nothing at all. And if you look at the example of Alaska, that was a Republican governor in a Republican state. And he made the case, he said, look, all this oil money, who would you rather get it? The government who's just going to screw it up, or you, the Alaskan people? And the Alaskan people said, us. And he was like, I thought you'd say that. And now if you look at Alaska, it's wildly popular in a deep red state, created thousands of jobs, improved children's health, decreased income inequality, which we know is a massive problem in this country. And it's so popular that a majority of Alaskans, a big majority, said they would accept higher taxes to fund the dividend. And you know Alaskans hate taxes. So the fact that that's been in effect for 37 years and is politically bulletproof gives us our path forward. We go get the money from Jeff Bezos and the gang, give it back to you, and it's for all Americans, and so it becomes politically untouchable, and everyone loves it. And even now, for my campaign, independents, Republicans, libertarians are all coming our way, because what they hate is a new bureaucracy that makes everyone's decisions. What they love is economic freedom and autonomy. This is the freedom dividend. It's even named after them. I tested it out. We tested a bunch of names, and that one tested the best, so we chose freedom dividend. So that's number one. So hopefully now the idea of everyone here in Iowa getting $1,000 a month actually seems very straightforward. And I'm going to suggest that not only is it desirable, it's necessary. Because in the absence of a move like this, you are just going to get sucked dry. All right, so that's number one, freedom dividend. Number two, I'm in the Medicare for All camp. We need to get health care off the backs of American families. It's immoral that in this country, when you get sick or injured, or your loved ones get sick or injured, you're more stressed out about navigating the bureaucracy and paying for treatment than you are actually getting the person healthy and well. And anyone who says where you're going to get the money is out of their minds. Because we're spending 18% of GDP right now, more than twice what other countries spend to worse results. And I've been the CEO of a business, we're spending tons of money on healthcare, and what does it do? It makes it harder to hire people. It makes it harder to treat them as full-time employees, because it's like, you don't make them a contractor, and they don't need to pay for their health insurance. It makes it harder for people to switch jobs. It makes it harder to start a business. It's this giant weight on our economy and our society, and we're spending twice as much as we need to. Because the way our system is designed, it is not designed to maximize our healthfulness. It is designed to maximize revenue.
Right.
And we know that if you went to the doctor and there was absolutely no financial incentive for them ordering a test, or having a procedure, or trying to do the, sell you stuff, they get paid on the basis of the more they do. If they just said that everyone who came in, like, they're fine, and they get paid less, so what happens? They're like, oh. The other element of it, too, is that they're afraid they're going to get sued. And so they do the extra mile because it's just like a, self-protection thing. But that just ends up ginning up costs, and it does not make us any healthier. So anyone who thinks you don't have the money just hasn't looked at the numbers. We're spending way more. There's almost no way we can help but save a ton of money and get access up. And as the CEO of a business, if the government came along and said, hey, good news, we're going to get healthcare off your hands, just give I would have been thrilled. Because it's not just the money, it's the fact that I have to sit there and become an expert on health insurance policies every time we do anything, and then I have to go to my employees and say, hey, we're going to make a change in your healthcare. And people have incredibly strong feelings about their healthcare. And so I was like, why am I getting brain damage over something that has nothing to do with my business? You know what I mean? I'm not like a health insurance broker. Like everybody. And as you can tell, I ran a small private company because you try and make people happy. So anyway, Medicare for all is the only way forward, and it's good for the economy, it's good for business, it's good for society. The third thing, how many of you all get excited about GDP when you wake up in the morning? I'm going to make a big contribution today, I can feel it. GDP is going to lead us off a cliff because robot trucks will be great for GDP. It's going to be terrible for us. It's going to be terrible for the drivers, terrible for those workers. My wife is at home with our 2 young boys, one of whom is autistic. What is her work considered as part of GDP?
Nothing.
0. What is the market value to work at? 0. And we know that's perverse. We know the work she's doing is some of the most important and challenging and difficult work that anyone can do. And so we have to start measuring our economy around things that would actually make us excited and correspond to how we're doing. So here are some of the things that are record highs aside from GDP. How many of you knew that life expectancy in the U.S. has declined for the last 3 years?
Yep.
And why has it declined? Drug overdoses and suicides. That's right. Both of those have overtaken vehicle deaths for the first time in American history. Do you know the last time America's life expectancy has declined for 3 years in a row? The Spanish flu of 1918 that killed millions of people. We're back to the Spanish flu territory. It's actually an anomaly for life expectancy in a developed country to decline in 1 year. For it to decline 3 years in a row is essentially unheard of. So what good is a GDP number that's going up if our people are dying, or if our kids are struggling, or if our mental health is failing, or our environment is getting less and less safe? So what we have to do is we have to start measuring our economy around those dimensions. And believe it or not, we can do it. We made up GDP almost 100 years ago. It was during the Great Depression, and everyone was like, we need to know what's going on. And then this guy came up with GDP, Simon Kuznets. And he said 3 things. He said, 1, this is a terrible measurement for national well-being. We should never use this now. Number 2, we should include parenthood and motherhood because it's so important. Number 3, we should not include military defense spending because it has no economic value. So of course we ignored all those things, and now we're about to chase GDP off a cliff. So one of my first acts as president will be I'm going to go down the street to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and I'm going to say, hey guys, GDP is almost 100 years old, it's really useless. So we're going to update it to a new scorecard that includes mental health and freedom from substance abuse, health and life expectancy, clean air and water, average income and affordability, childhood success rates, proportion of elderly who can retire in quality circumstances, and we're going to use that as our scorecard, and then I'm going to present that in the State of the Union every year and say, here's how we're doing. And so if I say, look, 8 Americans are dying of drugs every hour, that's horrifying. So we're now going to try and get that down to 4 over the next 3 years, and here's how we're going to do it. And then you galvanize energy around things that would actually help us, as opposed to this phantom GDP number that has nothing to do with anything. So that's the third big move, is to redefine our economy around us. It's what I call the trickle-up economy, from people, families, and communities up. And then we start measuring it along dimensions that are human-centered. That's the humanity-first, human-centered capitalism idea. So those are the 3 big proposals I'm leading with, the freedom dividend. And one thing I want to say, too, about this, the Democratic Party is supposed to be the party of empowering women, am I right? Right now, there are thousands of women in Iowa and millions of women around the country that are stuck in exploitative or abusive jobs or relationships that would be improved if they had $1,000 a month coming their way that was independent and free and clear. This is actually the most genuine way to empower women that we could do in real life. It would also do the same thing for communities of color with lower access to opportunities and education, to people in the LGBTQ community who are more likely to be fired from jobs and kicked out of their home and economically persecuted. This is actually a way we can advance many of the values that we have in a way that treats everyone like, in a way that can get everyone excited. So it's the freedom dividend, Medicare for all, the American scorecard. I've got 72 other policies on my website. including forgiving a lot of student loan debt because that stuff's immoral. Banning robocalls because they're just a waste of our time. I used to be excited when the phone rang. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna look at it. And then they're like trying to smooth you all the time. It's so annoying. They're like playing like this chess match with these like robocallers. It's crazy. So we gotta ban that. And then having a psychologist in the White House, I think would be a good idea. And I bet that I thought that even before this administration. So my brother's a psychology professor, and we need to destigmatize mental health issues. And this would be a very powerful way to do it. So Donald Trump's our president today because he got a lot of the problems correct. But his solutions were exactly the opposite of what we need. He said we got to build a wall, we got to turn the clock back, we're going to somehow restore the jobs. We actually have to turn the clock forwards. We have to start evolving in our conception of both work and value and start building an economy that works for us, the owners of this country. And I'm the man for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you all so much for being here today. We'd love to take some questions. Thank you all so much.
So fast forward, you're president. You know what goes on in Washington.
Yeah.
Politicians, they all gonna play their politics and they're gonna stop there and step in the way. How do you get your stuff in place?
Oh, it's so fun. All right, so I'm so excited for this. As of yesterday, I made 65,000 individual donors, which means I'm going to be in the Democratic primary debates. I'm not polling at 1% nationwide, even though no one knows who I am. And the prediction markets have my winning the nomination at 7%, which is a fifth in the field. And so people know, or people who are looking at this realize that the only thing standing between me and getting the nomination is name recognition. So most people have no idea who I am or what I'm about. But when they actually dig in, they'll be like, holy cow, this would actually improve our lives more directly and impactfully than anything else anyone's talking about. And then they're like, wait a minute, we can do that? And we 100% can do that. Alaska's already done it. In a democracy, there's nothing stopping us from voting ourselves a dividend and getting some of that value back in the cloud where it's going. So in this vision, thanks to you all, I finished top 3 in Iowa. On front page news around the world for that week where they're like, who the heck, what? We go to New Hampshire. The third party of New Hampshire is libertarians, and libertarians love this stuff. I went to high school in New Hampshire, and if we do really well here, I can win in New Hampshire. And then, dividend fever sweeps the nation. We go to Nevada, we go to South Carolina, we go to California. I give out a neat screen. And then I land in the White House in 2021. Everyone, and now Democrats and progressives are going to be like, wow, we're excited to work with our new Democratic president. Let's get money into the hands of families and children. Like, if you have $1,000 a month, what happens in real life? Children get stronger and healthier and better nourished. Graduation rates go up. Physical health improves. Mental health improves. Relationships improve. Domestic violence, like all the things that Democrats and progressives would love. And then you go to the Republicans and conservatives, and they look up and say, wait a minute, this is a massive wealth transfer to rural areas and red states on the interior. By the numbers. Like, we're going to suck up some of the money from Seattle and bring it to Arkansas. And so some of the conservatives and libertarians, and like in America, look at it and be like, am I going to stand in the way of my people literally getting like billions of dollars from the tech guys? And so all we need is a majority. We don't need 70%, we just need 51% because this is just an act of Congress. So this is the first big thing I'm going to get done as president. Maybe the second thing is the updating GDP is very easy. I can just go down the street and then. But then the second thing is this. And then America's going to wake up and be like, wow, our government did something right. Our government did something I really love. We can actually get big things done. And then we'll go to infrastructure, and then we'll go towards attacking climate change, and we'll go towards things that we can all agree on and get consensus on. But the great thing about it is there's nothing, like, it's very, very hard to argue against money. It's very hard to demonize money. You know, if I said I was going to do this thing to some complex system, like, then you could, like, try and villainize it. It's hysterical. They've had me on Fox 5 times, including Tucker Carlson. You can Google it, like, is Andrew Yang Tucker Carlson? And, like, the Fox people are like, wow, you know, can't argue with this. And then they realized that, like, maybe they've been too positive about me. So they then had these 3 people, like, just talk about me and try and like criticize and bash me. And then they posted that video on their website, and 80% of the comments were positive, of being like, yo, you guys know what you're talking about. Like, like it was like, on a Fox Business News channel. Like, I'm getting messages online saying that Republicans are switching parties just so they can vote in primaries for me. So I can get independents and Republicans and libertarians on board. And they've been arguing for aspects of what I'm saying for a long time, but we're going to take it with a progressive agenda. So that's how we're going to get things done. Sure.
So you say it's hard to argue with money. As somebody who's advocated for a lot of the policies you've talked about, the number one thing you hear, particularly if you talk about a living or higher wage, is, oh, well, you don't understand inflation. Which, you know, I kind of do, but like, you know, it's hard to explain to people, you know, hey, just because your wage goes up, regardless if it's a like hourly or monthly wage, like, it doesn't mean that the price of everything is going to rise.
That's
like,
right.
And like Seattle, like I try to explain,
right.
oh, Seattle, but like, it doesn't always work. So what would you say? That's going to be a lot of people. Like, that's not going to be like a tiny fraction. That's going to be a lot of people asking that question. What should we say, or what is your response to that?
So I'm for the spirit of a higher minimum wage work wage. No one should be working in this country any full-time before. But if you take, let's say, minimum wage from like in an area from like $10 to $15, there are certain businesses, small businesses that might cut back shifts. There are certain businesses that like fast food companies that might replace people with like a kiosk and whatnot. So there is at least some negative effect. I know in Seattle the effects generally have been very positive for it. But one of the reasons why that you can argue against it is that you're taking business from you're taking money from businesses, some of whom can afford it, some of whom like it's a little bit dicey. The great thing about this freedom dividend is we're actually going to get money and give it to customers, which is going to be good for business. And so if you're a business owner, all of a sudden you're like, I love this. Whereas at least some proportion of business owners would be uncomfortable with increasing the minimum wage. Though I 100% agree with you that there's no inflation associated with either of these things. There's no, I mean, there's like if you increase people's minimum wage, that doesn't have an effect on inflation. And if you give everyone $12,000 a year, you're also going to see minimal effect on inflation because I can go through the economics, but or you can take my word for it. But in the context of a $20 trillion economy, which is where we're at right now, we're not actually increasing the money supply by like a significant measure. And there's still price competition across every category. So I couldn't agree with you more. And if someone has an argument about it, I think we can win that argument. Yes, sir. You're doing work around the camera, so you deserve it. Yeah.
I wonder what better use you might make of the $3.8 billion a year that we give to Israel and what we spend on our endless wars.
Yeah, so I think that the endless wars must end. And we've spent over $1 trillion, had thousands of Americans die, and tens of thousands of non-Americans died over interventions that have had really unclear results and impact. So I would try and end the wars, be very, very judicious and restrained about any kind of military intervention. If we do something, it has to be that we have very clear, vital national goals at stake. And it should be Congress declaring war, not the president. Under the Constitution, it was always Congress's responsibility, and we just got away from that. So then you have much more popular consensus around the war if Congress said, let's go to war. So I couldn't agree with you more that the endless wars and entanglements need to end. We're spending $750 billion a year in our military, and a lot of that, and that we know of, it's probably worse than that. And I'm going to tell a story that like made me so sad, but it made perfect sense. I had a friend who was in the military, who was like a top pilot, and he told our mutual friend that the saddest part of his year is at the end of the year, they have him fly over the Pacific Ocean and just dump fuel into the ocean. And then you're like, why the heck would you have a pilot just dumping fuel into the ocean? And the answer is that they have a certain budget for fuel, and if they don't use it, they're afraid the budget's going to go down, so they just have to use all the fuel. That's the kind of perversion that happens if you have like a military industrial complex that just wants to make sure it stays maximally high. And so you hear that. So one of the things I'm going to do too is I'm going to say to the military folks, it's like, focus, and then all of a sudden, like, no more fuel dump emissions. But we have to try to find ways to try to curb the excessive spending, not just resources, but American lives. 22 military veterans or soldiers commit suicide every day, and we need to do much, much more from the beginning to when they come home. That includes not sending them into harm's way in the first place unless we absolutely have to.
What about the money to Israel?
I'm sorry?
The money to Israel.
You know, I mean, I'm going to dig into the specifics of like the foreign aid we give to different countries, so I wouldn't want to speak to that. Like, you know, it could be that 3.8 billion in the scheme of the money we give to other countries is appropriate, but you know, so I don't want to necessarily criticize that one expenditure.
Yeah, I think we support Israel because Hezbollah, Palestine, all those, they have a standing declaration of war against Israel. They're saying we're going to run you in to see if we can. So if there's a standing declaration of war against Israel, somebody's got to stand up against that. I mean, Hezbollah, Iran, they're all saying we're going to run you in to see if we get a chance. And Israel could do it to the Palestinians, but they got to respect it. They don't do it. So Israel, I think, needs to be funded.
I think it's really important because as you can see, there's like a real diversity of opinions about like a very, very important relationship.
You need to look carefully into that.
Yeah, no. I mean, like again, like I would question what
You gave a good answer on that. You need to look into it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Here you go, sir. You need your mic. You have benefits of being in the front row.
I'm wondering what would be a good idea to include something about saving money to.
Oh yeah, I love saving money.
So do I.
Yeah. So one of the things that they dig Democrats and progressives on is that we think like all government dollars like are awesome. And the truth of it is, if you look into like our federal government, there is some excess there, and you can see it in the numbers. So one of the benefits of this dividend that we give back to the American people, hopefully we can curb some of the unnecessary spending in like our military-industrial complex. But then on administrative things too, where if you're a private business and you had, let's say, like 500 people doing a certain task, and then AI came along, and then you looked at it and say, hey, maybe I can get this done with 50. Now, unfortunately, the federal government's incentives to get it from 500 to 50 is like, you know, not the same. And I'm not saying necessarily you should do the exact same thing in that context, but you have to at least look at it and then see if there are other things that you can be doing with those resources. Because there are resources, and the more responsible our government is with them, the better off we're going to be. I would say, too, one of my ideas on that list, which I urge you to go to yankee20.com and see like my list of policy suggestions. But one is that tax day right now is miserable for us all, and it's approaching. And if you were a country and you were getting hundreds of billions of dollars from your citizens, maybe you should make it a national holiday and call it Revenue Day. And then when you get you fill out your taxes, you get a thank you video showing where your money goes and thank yous from various federal employees. So at least you're like, okay, like I kind of know where my money's going. And then you get to elect where to send the last 1% to like an array of government programs. And then you think, oh, I actually really like the U.S. Forest Service. And you send it to them. And then you just have a better spirit about the fact that we're all Americans, we're paying tax, we're helping keep this great country vital and growing. Instead of just treating it like a thankless chore and being like, here's a, you know, like the whole thing. Like, it doesn't need to be so unpleasant. And if you can improve people's experience with government, then maybe their attitude towards government would improve. And that's part of it, is you have to try to control spending so no one's think they're like running around like spending money right now. Yeah, in the back.
Iowa, we have a low unemployment rate, and we haven't seen the effects fully yet of a lot of the AI stuff that's going to happen. And we're so isolated from a lot of where this is happening in the coast. We're one of the last places that it might come to, unfortunately. There's other things that are happening here that are great, but how do we talk about that then when our unemployment, our published unemployment rate is like, what, 2 point something, and people are very reactionary, and they might not resonate with your message until they've lost their job.
Yeah, so I've been talking mainly to Democrats, but people now are very responsive because they see their factories closed, their stores are now closing, and though there's a very low headline unemployment rate here in Iowa and across the country, it's also the case that a lot of people are working full-time and can't get by. Like, the affordability is very, very low, and that's something that's obscured by this headline unemployment number. 94% of the new jobs created in the United States since 2005 have been gig temporary contractor jobs that like don't have a real path forward, don't have benefits, and people are just scrambling. And so I always understand that. The headline unemployment number is incredibly misleading. As we're together right now, the labor participation rate in the U.S. is 63.2%, the same levels as Ecuador and Costa Rica. And that's year 10 of an expansion. It's a multi-decade low. 1 in 5 prime working age American men is out of the workforce right now. And so if you go to people and say, hey, like this is happening, most of them understand it. They don't look around saying like, hey, like everyone I know is doing great. If everyone we knew was doing great, then we wouldn't have all of the, Donald Trump would be our president, we wouldn't be dying younger, there wouldn't be like, all of these issues. So the big thing to know is that the headline unemployment number is in the same category as GDP, being super like misinformed. Yes?
I appreciate your sense of humor. I think you're the only funny guy I've ever heard. Guys that have heard it. But anyway, technology. Yours says humanity first. What we live with is technology first. And how do you persuade people who are so enamored with their smartphones that the smartphone has become God?
Yeah.
And especially among millennials. I mean, it's like I don't see the reaction against technology that you think you would see when people are choosing technology over humanity.
Are you a parent, sir?
What?
Are you a parent?
Yes.
Yeah, I sense that. And I agree with you that right now technology, the studies show that we're seeing record levels of anxiety and depression among adolescents, particularly adolescent girls, unprecedented levels. And they spiked when smartphones and social media got into their hands. It's like the data is 100% clear. So as president, I'm going to try and curb that in various ways. Because I agree with you. It's messing with our minds, and it's particularly overtaking the minds of our most vulnerable, like in terms of adolescents. I've got a 6-year-old, 3-year-old, and they already just love those screens. And as parents, it's very, very difficult when they're fussing at dinner and you're trying to have a conversation. It's like, here's the screen, and then they just like go into this, and then you feel a momentary pang of guilt, but then you do it. And so like this is the reality of the world we live in, but I want to help in a big way. And the tech companies, some of them are run by decent human beings who will get on board with ways to curb the excesses. Some of them are not. And the ones that are not, I'm going to we can do a lot more, let's put it that way. I know some of those people personally. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great, but we can do a whole lot more to protect our young people. And it's not that, I think you're right that we worship tech for too long. Yes, sir.
In relation to that somewhat, I want to know a little bit about your policy with regards to education, because there's been a recent development with regards to, for example, when measles outbreaks have been happening around the country with regards to the anti-vaccination movement. There's a lot of nuance behind why people go forward with that kind of policy of I'm not going to vaccinate my kids. There's so much data to show that that's a good thing to do and it's something that improves health. But there's something about education specifically and the fact that there's so much misinformation on the internet, and it's related somewhat to the social media aspect of it, because people who do not know anything about it, frankly, are espousing these ideas. And there should be something done about, I think, the education specifically about that. So I want to know if that might be something that relates to that whole social media control.
I thought you were going to ask about college education stuff, and then you went towards like the anti-vaccine movement. Yeah. So to me, the mistrust in vaccines is like just a manifestation of our collapsing faith in institutions generally. And you can see it in the numbers. It's like we trust our government less, schools less, hospitals less, media less. And so then if you have parents, you go to a kid and be like, hey, get a vaccine. It's like, oh, I don't trust you. It's like the latest. And so then if you come to them and say like, no, you must trust them, like you come across as like you're strong-arming someone. And so really like the mission we have to have is to try and restore that sense of faith and trust, at least in facts. And that's a very, very hard thing to do. It's a very important thing to do. One aspect of one way we can help keep facts central is local journalism is dying around the country. Over 1,200 newspapers have gone out of business because they used to rely on classified ads, and the classified ads disappeared and went to Craigslist, and now they have no money, and then they're going out of business. And studies have shown that when you lose your local newspaper, democracy suffers, voters get more polarized and less informed, And we're all looking at it being like, well, I guess that's the end of journalism, like on a local scale, and I think that's nuts. And so as president, I'm going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in helping local communities come up with cooperative business models for journalism so that it can be sustained. And then hopefully you have more people that are getting quality information, and then you can start building trust on things like vaccines and many other issues. Because to me it's vaccines and then it's everything else.
All right, we have time for 2 more.
Yes, Miss.
How are you going to combat climate change, and do you feel like you can support the carbon fee and dividend?
Oh, I love the carbon fee dividend. That's overdue. Like, internalizing externalities is like my favorite thing in the world. So climate change is existential threat 1A. The fact that I haven't talked about it is because I think that the financial security and the automation are actually tied to climate change, and here's why. So in this country right now, 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, 57% can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, then you have like your head down saying, well, if I pay this bill, I can't pay that bill. If I take extra time for this, I'll save this money. And it decreases your functional IQ by 13 points, according to studies, having a mindset of scarcity. So if you have this sneaking feeling that America is getting less reasonable, less rational, more subject to bad ideas, and even more xenophobic, we are. We are because we've introduced pervasive financial insecurity into our society. And then if you go to someone and say, hey, we need to worry about climate change, they'll look at you and they'll say, I can't pay my bills. The penguins will have to wait in line. You know? So the first move is that we get the boot off of people's throats economically, and we say, hey, guess what? You're an American, we love you, like, this is a society of $20 trillion, like, and we reverse the mindset of scarcity with the mindset of abundance. And then we go to them and say, hey, we need to worry about climate change, and they look at their children and they say, yes, we do. And then we move very, very hard and fast towards renewables and better infrastructure and carbon fee and dividend and rejoining the Paris Accords. But the brutal reality is that the last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history, and America is only 15% of global emissions. So even if we go hardcore towards renewables, we're probably not going to stop the acceleration of climate change over time. I don't know if you saw the article, China won't even take our recyclables anymore. Like we have. Right. So we're going to have to start investing in countermeasures like carbon capture and sequestration,
yes,
and geoengineering, and trying to equip our infrastructures to prepare for the worst effects. And one thing I'll say too is that putting $1,000 a month into people's hands, I believe, will help. Because who suffers the most in a natural disaster?
Poor.
The poor people, right? And so if you have this resource in people's hands, that people will be better able to like move in case of disaster or repair. There also, I believe, will be a movement towards communal living and minimalism with like a lower carbon footprint. So it's all tied together. Am I passionate about climate change? 100% yes. But can we accelerate our approach to climate change if we remove the financial insecurity? 100% yes. All right, last question. Make it good. Sir in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Yang, for coming. So my name is Caleb Gates. I work with refugees and immigrants, and I'm wondering what you specifically would advocate to updating and fixing our broken immigration system. I saw that you support the DREAM Act, support a longer path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, but what else would you advocate specifically to fix our broken immigration system?
Yeah, I'm the son of immigrants. I naturally think immigrants make the country stronger and more dynamic. And so as you said, DREAM Act, path to citizenship, and to me this is going to sound sort of maybe mundane, but I just think like the paperwork and processes are so crippling right now. Where I have people that as soon as you get into the immigration system, it's like this bureaucratic black hole. And that no one can get straight answers. You have to hire expensive lawyers to like be able to make an appeal and get this thing done. So I just want to try and clean up a lot of the actual processes and the guts of interacting with the system. I would increase the allocations of certainly like many types of visas. And at the high end, if someone studies at a U.S. university from abroad, we should be trying to keep them. We should like staple a green card to their diploma. It makes no sense to educate someone from another country and then send them away to compete against you. And a lot of those people want to stay here, and then we're essentially kicking them out. So that's a different population than the population you're working with. And congratulations on the awesome work you do, because I think that everyone here knows that you're doing incredible work for people that need it. Let's give them a round of applause. I'd say one thing I can promise you is that I'm the opposite of Donald Trump in several respects. So Donald Trump is saying like, hey, build a wall, like, these people are your problem. And if I'm president, then I will say, look, if you come to this country and work hard, your son or daughter can become president.
There you go.
And then I want to be able to give these well, that's a poignant note to end this on. So thank you all very, very much. I'm here with you all because you all have the history of the country in your hands. You know that. You're a little bit spoiled by it. But if you take this vision of a human-centered economy, of a trickle-up economy, we can make it real like that. And if you do not, then it will never happen. And that is the power you have. So I know that you will take this message to heart and think about what kind of message you want to send to the rest of the country. So thank you all very, very much.